When I decide on a topic for a video, I have 3 criteria. First, is the topic something I'm passionate about? Second, are there already a million other videos made about the topic? And third, do I provide any fresh, meaningful insight to a discussion about that topic? I bring this up because as much as I love Super Mario Galaxy and would enjoy making a video about it, there's like a million other videos from people my age that already shared how special Super Mario Galaxy is. I have nothing new to bring to the table. However, I noticed there's nowhere near as many videos exploring in-depth topics about Mario Odyssey. Obviously, the game is much more recent than most of Mario's library, and is still technically the newest 3D Mario entry, which means less time has passed for reflection. However, I also think people haven't realized this game released quite a while ago, and that there's nothing left to talk about with this game, especially since there's a vocal minority that really has it out for this game because of its more relaxed progression structure. Now, this video isn't meant to be about why Odyssey is better or worse than you think. I wanted to make this video because Mario is currently hitting a renaissance period with the likes of Wonder, new and remade RPGs, and the Mario Kart 8 Booster Pass. I personally think Odyssey is what put this adrenaline shot into the franchise's arm, and I want to talk about how aspects of Odyssey's level design, such as its presentation and progression, led to today, and how they will possibly continue to affect the future of Mario. While the quality of Mario games has rarely faltered, there was a long period of stagnation that started during the Wii DS generation that worsened in the Wii U 3DS generation. Multiple series and spin-offs were feeling stale, and that was leading to overall apathy. Odyssey was a departure of relying on what worked, and wasn't afraid to try new ideas, even if not every one was a slam dunk. I want to spend the time of this video dissecting how the 3D Mario dev team at Nintendo was able to reinvent Mario for a new era of creativity while not losing the identity of what makes Mario, well, Mario. Also, as a personal tangent, between 3D All-Stars, 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, and the fact that I replayed Galaxy 2 and 3D Land a couple of years ago, I realized this was the least recent 3D Mario game I've played, so I felt very intrigued to give this game a replay after playing every other 3D Mario since the last time I played Odyssey about 5 years ago. Join me on this journey as I look back on one of the Switch's hit debut titles to see how Super Mario Odyssey's influence is felt today, 7 years later. When it comes to the presentation of Mario games, the word I'd use to describe them is whimsical. Right out the gate with the original Super Mario Bros., this series has had a strong dreamlike identity. Anything feels possible, but there's just enough loose logic that holds everything together. The new Super Mario Bros. Set of games took that identity and refined it. In that refinement, the games did start to fall into a routine. 3-star themed collectibles scattered throughout each stage, familiar faces as bosses every game, and 8 worlds that maintained the same themes: grass, desert, ice, jungle, water, mountain, sky, and lava, roughly in that order. A series that was built on showing you things you've never seen before was now something that always gave you what you had seen before. Thankfully, Odyssey feels like its main goal is to finally give players a journey that they haven't experienced in the Mario universe before. This is established right from the start with early game locations, such as the Cap and Cascade Kingdom. Kingdoms have so much variety and personality in their design compared to the worlds of most Mario games prior. Now, I'm not going to pretend that Odyssey completely breaks from what came before and does things unprecedented across all of gaming. I mean, I was just in the Pale Heart from Destiny's latest expansion, and that is a unique environment across all of gaming. However, for Mario standards, Odyssey deviates pretty hard from the striped hills, bright colored blocks, and giant mushrooms that are core pieces of the series' scenery. Throwing out these traditional elements of Mario's iconography really does go a long way to give Odyssey its own identity, and I felt that on my replay. The biggest help this game's art direction gets to make it stand out from any other Mario experience is the real-life inspiration. Having multiple styles of architecture, such as Mexico for the Sand Kingdom, Greece for the Lake Kingdom, feudal Japan for Bowser's Kingdom, and Gary, Indiana for the Ruined Kingdom, really makes you feel like you're getting a taste of everything our cultures have to offer. In my opinion, this element makes something like the Sand Kingdom the most interesting desert area a Mario game has seen to this day, despite its boring name. Between the red sand, colorful buildings, Mayan-inspired ruins, and ice caves, the Sand Kingdom has a lot more going on for it than any desert worlds in a new Super Mario Bros. Game, which usually opt for a more Egyptian-inspired theme. On top of the architecture, most kingdoms feel denser with activity than any area from previous 3D Mario games, outside of maybe a couple galaxies from Galaxy 1, like Battle Rock or Melty Molten. From just what's shown on the map, you could call an area like the Snow Kingdom small. To me, not including the town, 4 caverns, and 2 racetracks is doing the area a disservice. That's not even including the side areas from all the pipes and doors littered around, which I would also count as part of the kingdom. Due to the activity density, Odyssey feels like the inverse of most other open world games. Instead of having a large space that struggles to make it all interesting, this game gives you worlds that seem small at first, but have a deceptive amount of depth to them. Space is almost never wasted, and to me, that's a very important quality of game design. Most of the kingdoms also do a good job with their skyboxes giving a sense of scale, such as seeing the biodome paneling in the Wooded Kingdom and all the other islands in the background of the Cascade and Luncheon Kingdoms. My favorite environment design is how the biggest section of the playable area in the Metro Kingdom is built on top of a giant skyscraper. The design gives me Alaskan bullworm vibes and really reinforces that whimsical feeling that keeps me captivated on the Mario universe. The Sand Kingdom and Mushroom Kingdom are the only two that stick out to me as lacking a creative reason why their play space is a floating island. I feel that having a super steep mountain range surrounding the area would have made for a much more natural feeling border. The other aspect of presentation that jumped out to me when replaying this game was how good the texture and animation work is. Maybe I've just been playing too many Pokemon games, but I was shocked at how good everything looked when I returned. Mario games have always looked pretty good, but during the Wii U 3DS era, they have very plasticky textures. Don't get me wrong, the colors pop nicely, but everything has this sterile feel to it that suppresses the emotion. It's too clean and there's a lack of character because of that. Odyssey, and by extension Wonder, do not have this problem. They have a much wider variety of textures that make up its environments and creatures to make them feel different from one another. Chain Chomps look much rougher with their metallic sheen, the poison looks like it carries more weight with its thicker sludge, and stone feels more natural because there are cracks and chips in it. On the animation front, there's a noticeable quality improvement from previous entries. Mario is reactive to his environment, whether it's due to the temperature of the region or activity he's participating in. And it's not just him. Enemies and NPCs have more detailed reactions if you're approaching them and interacting with them. Details like characters cowering in fear when you get near them as a possessed enemy go a long way to add more charm. Environments feel noticeably livelier and make Odyssey more engaging to play. Complementing these new textures and animations are a huge suite of new characters. Despite the names of half the Mario games released during the previous era, new enemies and NPCs were in short supply. This wasn't a problem that only affected the main series platformers. Paper Mario fans were in shambles during the 3DS Wii U era because most NPCs in the games during that time were Toads and had some of the most boring dialogue imaginable. In Odyssey, almost every major kingdom has a unique NPC that is new to the Mario universe. They're all very charming and bring a unique vibe to the table. The animator who is able to give these forks easily readable body language by making their prongs act as legs and arms disturbs and impresses me. On top of these major improvements to presentation, there are loads of smaller details backing them up. For example, the brochures add an extra layer of charm that gives this game a stronger sense of identity. Each kingdom has its own pamphlet that provides a combination of clues for scavenging and flavor text for world building. The only menu interface I've seen with more style is Tunic's manual. There are also many subtle nods to Mario's history, such as the street names in New Donk City being named after Donkey Kong characters, Starbits being the purple coins of the Moon Kingdom, and outfits referencing old Nintendo products. Also, having the original 8-bit sprites fossilized in the Cascade Kingdom is a joke that only gets better with age. Also, I didn't know where else to put it, but I wanted to point out that a bunch of the warp areas use this cube aesthetic that I thoroughly enjoy. It probably comes off as lazy to some, but I've got a thing for that simple VR future cube aesthetic like the Vex network in Destiny or the final Season 2. I can agree that's a little out of place in a Mario game, but I think it works. Overall, the presentation of this game is strong. I don't think it quite hits the highs of the cosmic scale of the Galaxy games, but it makes up for it by introducing new styles of locales that weren't yet seen in the Mario universe. I can tell diverse settings have been a very important focus of recent entries. Lake Lapcat and the Flower Kingdom also made sure their environments didn't retread too much old ground. I think Odyssey will continue to age fine as long as certain components of its design don't get overused in future releases. Thankfully, presentation is far from the only aspect Odyssey successfully shakes up. Next up, I want to talk about the moment-to-moment gameplay, which in the case of a platformer is movement. Mario has always felt smooth to control, but Odyssey really kicks things up a notch. You can tell the devs made sure to come over every aspect of the capabilities players expect from Mario's movement and made additions and changes accordingly. On the minor end, I want to shout out the ability to ground pound into a vertical pipe or roll into a horizontal pipe for fast pipe entries, as one of my favorite additions to Mario's moveset ever. It adds a little bit of optional flair that makes entering a pipe more engaging, and I've got a feeling this move is here to stay because the Switch port of 3D World made sure to include this addition. On the major end, there's additions like the ground pound jump, rolling, and the return of 64's dive, although the biggest change is Mario's hat throw. Being able to throw your hat to collect coins or as a platform to boost your jumps feels so natural, it really makes you question why Mario's cap hadn't been a part of his moveset prior. I have a strong suspicion that every new main series Mario game will incorporate his hat into his moveset in some fashion. Ever since Mario 64, Mario's movement tech was shrunken to help refine a core set of abilities. Odyssey finally reverses this trend with all of these returns and additions. The only notable move from 64 that feels like it's missing is the kick, since it helped cut momentum for jump corrections, but throwing your hat in Odyssey basically does the same thing, so the kick submission is understandable. All these changes are nice on their own, but where the magic happens is how all these new and returning actions can be chained together. Chaining a dive into a roll into a long jump is super satisfying. All moves can be seamlessly chained together for any duration as long as you're on the ground. I was always performing these actions while traversing because it was just too enjoyable to pull off. In the air, there are a few cooldown restrictions, but they're generous enough to allow Mario to cross distance and height like he never could before. On top of this very refined and robust movement, Odyssey has two decently fleshed out mechanics. The first mechanic is 2D platforming on 3D objects. While this concept is played around with a healthy amount in interesting ways, it's so modestly presented for being the first game ever to do this at this level. Despite how creative levels such as the cube and folding screen are, I feel like there was a restraint on how far to push the ideas. A whole Mario game could easily be made from this type of gameplay. It's still so novel that even 7 years later, the only game that's attempting to flesh out this concept further is The Plucky Squire, which I believe is supposed to release later this year. The other gameplay mechanic is the capture ability, which definitely stole the spotlight. Pushed in most of the game's marketing, this mechanic is a reversal of Kirby's iconic copy abilities. Instead of putting your foe's abilities into you, you're putting yourself into the enemy. Not all capture abilities are created equal, but they do fall into two camps: practical use and flavor. The flavor captures usually happen in one-offs or for humor or shock value, like capturing a manhole or tree to move it out of the way. The practical captures have more meat in their gameplay and can spice up the way you interact with the game world through what is essentially a minigame. With one or two button controls, captures like Pokio, Sherm, and Uproot have an arcadey feel to them that I found endearing, even though they obviously lack the mechanical depth of Mario's base abilities. They do exactly what it says on the tin, nothing more, nothing less. What I appreciate about captures is that they keep the gameplay flowing even during their tutorials. Some will have a quick video that pops up in the bottom right corner, but nothing stops the gameplay to a screeching halt, which the billboards in Galaxy are guilty of. Most of their introductions have clever setups that teach you everything you need to know about them. For example, the first time you run into Bullet Bills, there are two moons right next to each other, one in a brick and the other on a pedestal off in the distance. These moons teach you that bullet bills can be used to destroy obstacles and travel along gaps without a single word. I personally think that this is flawless game design because it teaches you everything you need to know about the capture without sacrificing pacing. So you have arguably the best movement in any 3D platformer, along with two well thought out mechanics that are pretty novel across all of gaming. That begs the question, what the hell are we doing with all this? Before Odyssey released, an official infographic was released that divided the 3D Mario games into two categories, linear and sandbox. It showed that Odyssey's progression would be closer to the 64 and Sunshine sandbox style of progression compared to the other games. I'm personally not a fan of this infographic because I think it grossly oversimplifies the progression of these games. 64 is definitely very open in its progression structure. Any star you collect pushes you closer to beating the game. While at first glance, Sunshine seems to be similar due to its layout, Sunshine is actually the most linear 3D Mario game. To beat the game, you must finish episode 7 of each area, which is the level where you chase Bowser Jr. disguised as Mario. All their shines besides these 50 are irrelevant for progression. No other 3D Mario has this issue where there are stars that don't give you any progress to the game's completion. You have more choice in the order you collect 3D Land's star medals or 3D World's green stars than Sunshine's shine sprites. Also, Galaxy falls more in line with 64 and Sunshine than the two 3D games in my opinion. Galaxy's mid-game provides a plethora of options to earn the power stars required to reach Bowser at the center of the universe. The choices I have selecting Galaxies feels just as broad as the choices I have selecting paintings. And that's just how I feel about the games that aren't Odyssey. I personally wouldn't group Odyssey with any of the previous 3D games because its core progression structure has little in common with these predecessors. The process of collecting moons is less about reaching a mission's end goal and more about leaving no stone unturned. It's a scavenger hunt. While this style of progression isn't new to 3D Mario with the likes of Sunshine's blue coins or Galaxy 2's green stars, it's never taken center stage until now. It was definitely a ballsy move to pivot into this direction. It was frustrating to get all the blue coins in Sunshine because certain coins would be in specific episodes and there was no way of knowing how many were in each one without a guide. While Galaxy's green stars did put you in the proper level, it was not fun having to relaunch the level every single time. Thankfully, Odyssey learns from these previous mistakes. Collecting moons is infinitely more enjoyable than blue coins and green stars. Having one level that dynamically updates over time, instead of relaunching specific missions of a level, makes this scavenger hunt design so much more palatable. Odyssey also provides the player with tools to keep frustration at a minimum. Talkatoo and Blue Toad provide options to help players find moons in a more natural in-game way that's not looking up a guide online. Now, if I were to grossly oversimplify 3D Mario's progression into two categories, then I would have every game prior to Odyssey be in one category, and then have Odyssey and Bowser's Fury in the other. The distinction between the two groups is that the former has a hub space, and the latter doesn't. Outside of the globe menu, Odyssey has you in the levels with as minimal downtime as possible. This greatly changes the pacing of the game from its predecessors. All their games had this loop of go out, get a star, come back to base, repeat. Odyssey lets you earn as many moons as you can before banking them at the Odyssey. Bowser's Fury doesn't even have a place to dunk the cat shines at. You're just constantly in that game's world for the whole game's runtime. This is where I personally think 3D Mario is never going back. I would be shocked if the next 3D Mario has a hub or even a world map. I think it's going to be like Bowser's Fury on a much bigger scale. One persistent world that regularly changes as you collect the stars, or whatever equivalent it will have. Due to this huge shift in progression focus, there's bound to be growing pains. The hubless dynamic levels of Odyssey meant the designers could place more rewards, since they didn't have to worry about wasting your time by being booted out to the level and having to re-enter. However, the lack of restraint in reward placement led to the biggest criticism this game gets, which is, this game's got a lot of moons. too many moons, 880 moons to be exact. Between the high quantity and scavenger hunt progression of power moons, not all of them are earned with equal effort. There are some freebies out in the open, and others have you do really simple tasks such as talking to an NPC while wearing a specific outfit. Others are earned by more traditional platforming sections, and others have light puzzle solving. While I'm about to tear into some of my own personal moon criticisms, I think people who view any moons that aren't earned by clearing a more traditional section or boss fight as not a real moon are being silly and overdramatic. I find this to be an old man yells at cloud perspective that projects too much of their previous experiences onto their expectations of an upcoming experience. There are some people that were genuinely offended when they earned a moon like Bench Friends, but I personally don't see a problem. It's a cute moment with the new Donk Citizen that adds character to the game world. Even though I'm fine with most of the moons in the game, there are definitely a few groups of moons I'm not a fan of. This game has a very snappy pace, so anything that grinds that pace to a screeching halt is not an enjoyable experience to me. Ironically, Cooper Racing is one of these. The fact that 2 moons in most kingdoms are dedicated to this activity is really what gets me. The second version only adds one slightly faster racer. There were times where I had a slower completion time on the harder race, and still won with ease. I think having shakeups in the course's terrain on that second race, or just cutting the first race entirely, would have done enough to make these palatable to me. To be fair, racing minigames never feel good to me, so this could just be a me issue. Another moon type that kills all pacing is sheep herding. When I entered the pipe that led me to the sheep herding challenge room, I straight up gave a 1,000 yard stare at my TV screen. Along with these types, there are some one-off moons like making this plant grow by spinning a few hundred coins at it that I think have the power to give someone an existential crisis. I did enjoy the shout out to the Mario Maker community though. Pick a pipe never goes out of style. Then there's hint art. I do love the idea of hint art. I'm an advocate for knowledge-based progression systems. Tunic and Outer Wilds are some of my favorite games because of that. Having a puzzle become a memory test on future playthroughs is smart game design, in my opinion. Unfortunately, hint art requires you to interact with the painting to spawn the moon. It was kind of a letdown when I remembered some of them, like the keep hint art, but couldn't get the moon from it until I had looked at the painting later on in my playthrough. To finish off, my least favorite individual moon is the 100 volleyball rally. This moon is agonizing to get since it feels like it takes a while for the ball's speed to get rolling compared to how quick the similar jump rope challenge is. I remember cheesing with Cappy as player 2 when I went for 100% completion way back when. For this playthrough, I gave it one honest try, failed at 80 rallies, and didn't feel like bothering with it anymore. Personally, I can forgive all these at the end of the day because they do attempt to be engaging, but there's one subset of moons that I have no sympathy for. That one offender that I have to point out is the laziest design I've ever seen in a Mario game are the Toadette achievements. Earning power moons as a reward for earning power moons reaches a point of absurdity that even I have to roll my eyes at. Now, despite this rant, I do actually like the new 3D Mario progression system. Finding moons to power up the Odyssey is a satisfying gameplay loop that kept me invested until I reached the darker side. There's a lot of variety in moon acquisition that helps make them interesting. Most are straightforward, but some require you to think outside the box. I think it really only starts falling apart at the end if you're trying to get all 880 moons or buying moons in the store to max out the counter. There are some very light cosmetic rewards for hitting these milestones. Your Odyssey sail becomes gold when you collect all 880, and Peach's Castle gets a giant top hat on it if you max out the moon counter at 999. Despite these rewards, it's pretty obvious that practical completion is meant to end once you hit Darker Side at 500 moons. Speaking of Darker Side, one of my favorite gaming traditions is the 3D Mario Final Level tradition that Galaxy 2 started. The final level being this absolute hell that asks for everything from the player is a great way to make a game finale in my opinion. This level is no exception, but it definitely isn't as insane as Champions Road or The Perfect Run. The one part that's truly evil though was this moving platform bit followed by timing flings on these pendulums with the Pokio. Dying there twice definitely took a piece of my soul. What I think's interesting is as of Mario Wonder, this soul-crushing tradition has now bled into 2D Mario, and I couldn't be happier about it. The game was very satisfying all the way through to this point, but I know I would build some resentment if I decided to get that remaining 200-ish moons, which, to be fair, about a quarter of them were at Toadette that I didn't feel like claiming. This brings me to my conclusion about this game's progression, and how I think it can be improved. Personally, I find this style of completion to be interesting, but I do understand the qualms of how messy this game's true completion is. Getting 120 stars in the previous games, that aren't Sunshine, is honestly pretty fun, although getting 242 stars in either Galaxy game is slightly less fun. The point is, these previous games had a completion number that felt right. Odyssey has 3 numbers that you can end on, and none of them feel right. 500 definitely feels too low, 880 is a bit exhausting, and 999 is honestly just a meme. I know when there's problems with the new system, most people will cry out to return to the old system. In this instance, I think untangling the knots of Odyssey's progression to give it another go is the correct play. The biggest knot I hope is untangled for the next 3D Mario game isn't how many collectibles there will be, rather how many types of collectibles there will be and what the importance each one has. I just said the current completion numbers aren't satisfying, but I don't think there is a perfect number of moons that Odyssey could have ended on. Instead, the moon should have had more depth to make their acquisition more interesting. For example, different colored moons could have given different bonuses. Collecting 10 moons from the Lake Kingdom could have increased Mario's maximum oxygen. A different solution could be adding more items to layer with moons, which does sort of exist in Odyssey. Besides power moons, the other main activity players can pursue is gathering normal and purple regional coins to purchase cosmetics from the Crazy Cap store. There was a respectable offering at launch, but a few months after, Balloon World was released in a free update, and this playthrough gave me a new respect for it. When Balloon World had originally released, I remember not being too impressed with it. At the time, I experienced it as someone who had recently 100% of their save file. Even though new outfits were added to purchase with coins, the loop on its own wasn't too engaging. As an activity to layer in with your moon hunting, it honestly works very well. Hiding a well-placed balloon that passively earns you a few thousand coins while you're also collecting moons feels nice. I've always been a fan of being able to layer multiple gameplay loops on top of each other, and this scratches that itch. Also, Balloon World was surprisingly active. People were always hunting for my balloons, and I had a plethora of options if I decided to seek instead. I remember there being a lot of out-of-bounds exploits that I believed were patched since, because I didn't run into any this time, which also made my new experience with the mode much more pleasant. The only gripes I had with the mode this time around were the notifications that would occasionally make me mess up some platforming, and the fact that leaving Balloon World to spend coins you earned once you maxed out would break your win streak. What I learned from Balloon World is that layering the coin grind for the post-launch outfits while hunting for moons during this playthrough made the game very enjoyable compared to my old playthrough way back when I did them separately. I found unlocking the wide range of apparel just as, if not more, satisfying than hunting for moons. This was the first time I unlocked the 8-bit costume, and its silliness was definitely a standout during my run back of this game. I also enjoyed all the references to other Mario games, no matter how obvious, subtle, or unintentional they may be. The hell you just say about me? This is why the conclusion I hit when it comes to this new style of 3D Mario is that these games need multiple types of rewards. Just stars, shines, moons, or whatever doesn't cut it for a hubless sandbox world. Imagine being able to collect multiple rewards that feed into each other for a more exciting gameplay loop. Thankfully, you don't need to imagine, because that game already exists. From a pure progression point of view, these two games almost couldn't be more similar. Their game space is divided into several different areas that provide varied gameplay and visuals. These spaces are littered with hundreds of rewards for players to earn, with a pretty straightforward path to earn them. They culminate into a post-game challenge that tests your mastery of the game's respective core gameplay loop. The only difference is that Kratos gets a wide variety of progression options when he opens a chest. Imagine opening a chest in one of the two modern God of War games and this happens. Now, I'm not saying Mario needs an axe to upgrade throughout his next adventure. I'm just really trying to drive home the point that the core flaw I see in Odyssey is a lack in reward depth. Having the same rewards of the older 3D Mario games with the new scavenger hunt progression model just doesn't hit the same. I felt this flaw in Bowser's Fury as well, but that game had such a short runtime, it's pretty negligible. To wrap things up, I know most video game essay content boils down to this game good or bad and why. This video could be oversimplified to Mario Odyssey is good because I think the game is good. However, the message I want you to leave with, and the whole reason I made this video, is that Odyssey was a major shift in Mario's core design philosophy, and I don't think we're going back. Odyssey is just as impactful to Mario's legacy as 64 or Galaxy, just in a different context. Mario 64 was revolutionary for its time. It was the industry icon that led to the push into 3D games. Galaxy is grand. It has large-scale, majestic set pieces like the series had never seen before, and personally, I think we haven't seen since. Odyssey is inspirational. After almost a decade of being predictable, Odyssey was a message saying that this series isn't done surprising you, and I think most people have felt that message over the last couple of years. Wonder felt the most 3D Mario out of any of the 2D games. Decades-old Mario RPGs that were long forgotten are being remade. I believe Odyssey was the catalyst that sparked these ideas and decisions, and should be recognized as such. This game spearheaded Mario into a more creative era that we are currently experiencing, and because of that, I think this game is most certainly a masterpiece. If you finished the video, thank you. It means a lot as a smaller creator that you spent the time to watch the entire thing that I've made. If you enjoyed it, I'd appreciate if you checked out another video of mine that I've made. I try to make them all of a similar quality. On the left, I'll put up a video for the Destiny Lightfall review that I made that is more of a long form content topic. And on the right, I made a recent rant about how terrible battle passes are. That is more on the shorter end, about 10 minutes. Like I said, appreciate if you checked one of these out, but if not, I hope you enjoyed watching what I made, and you have a good day. Bye.